Welcome back, everybody. The human brain is definitely one of the most complicated parts of the body, but a new book says that a better understanding of the brain could have a major positive impact on society. Electric Brain takes a deeper look at the importance of brain waves and what they can tell you about the way you learn and your personality. Author Dr. R. Douglas Fields joins me now. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
So let's talk about brain waves. What are they exactly? Why do they matter so much?
Well, these waves of electromagnetic radiation are radiating out of your brain right now, in my brain, and they will for your entire life. And they can be picked up by an electrode on your scalp and fed into a computer. But these waves change with our cognitive state, our thoughts, and our intentions. And by reading these brain waves, neuroscientists can diagnose neurological illnesses, but more recently, also diagnose psychological mental illnesses such as ADHD and schizophrenia.
Really?
Yes, and depression, and treat those without drugs by modifying brain waves.
How do you modify a brainwave?
Oh, many different ways. You can use neurofeedback, you can use stimulation of the brain, you can use flashing lights to clear beta amyloid out of the brain, for example. This is some of the most recent research.
That's amazing, and considering the amount of depression and anxiety that people experience, that sounds like that has a promising future, perhaps.
Yes, and in addition to this, you can unite brainwaves with machines. You can pick up brainwaves from one person and transmit them into the brain of another person and control that person's behavior. You can even do this across,
what?
Yes, even across species.
Oh my goodness, across species.
Yeah, you can make a rat tail flick by picking up a brainwave in a human having that intention. But the implications are for prosthetic devices. You can control everything from a motorized wheelchair to a fighter drone with your thoughts, and of course prosthetic limbs and that kind of thing.
That's amazing. So why did you write The Electric Brain? What's in here that we can take away as lay people?
Oh, I wrote it for
understand?
lay people. Yeah, well, a couple of things. I think that one of the most interesting things about this is that being able to monitor electrical activity in the brain gives insight into our cognitive abilities. So we talked about disease, but researchers can measure your brain electrical activity for 5 minutes while you do nothing but let your mind wander and tell you what kind of brain you have. They can determine what its strengths and weaknesses are, what your IQ is, how well you can learn different things. You can measure electrical activity in a preschool child's brain and predict how well that boy or girl will be able to read when they go to school. And some of that pioneering work is being done right here at University of Washington. I visited that lab and described that work in Electric Brain, where they hacked my brain.
What did they tell you?
Well, Dr. Andrea Stocco and Chantel Pratt here at University of Washington were doing research where they claimed they could measure your brainwaves for 5 minutes while you did nothing but let your mind wander, and then predict how well you could learn a second language. So I challenged her to do that with me. This was while she was doing her research. This work has now been published. She put electrodes on my brain, closed the door, let me sit there quietly, then came back and starts clicking her keyboard, analyzing the waves, and then she looks over to me and she says, "Good thing you're an American."
Because not so good with the language, apparently?
I studied German and Spanish in college. It just didn't stick. But it's so creepy to have somebody hack your brain and think how this is going to transform education and career choices. This is the future. The genie's out of the bottle. But
do we want to know all this about
well, that's a question. Good question. I mean, we've kind of already faced that with medical diagnoses, right? Do you want to know if you have the gene for breast cancer or Alzheimer's?
Right.
But in the same way, we can monitor electrical activity in the brain and say, this child is going to have trouble reading. And you can begin to intervene and do something. It's the same way as if you have, cholesterol reading in your blood and say, you're going to get a stroke unless you do something. So that's how this will be used, I think, in the future.
So brain-computer interface, BCI technology, what is that? Why is it important?
Well, this allows you to connect the brain to computers and computers to the brain so that you can control prosthetic limbs. In Electric Brain, I interview many pioneering people who have spinal cord injury and they have implants in their brain. They can control prosthetic devices.
That's amazing.
It's amazing, and these people, beyond the gee whiz aspect, these people are courageous. They've gone through brain surgeries to have these implants in their brain to try and help other people. But that's the future. People who have ALS and they can't speak or move a muscle at all can now communicate by using their thoughts.
Wow. So you hiked up Rainier. First of all, that's impressive because it's not that easy. I know lots of people around here have done it, but it's not easy. And you wanted to find out what the altitude did to our brains.
Right.
What'd you find out?
Well, yes. Well, to back
There
up.
you are, by the way. I just want to give you full credit.
Okay, thanks. All right, so a little bit back up here is, why don't we know who discovered brainwaves? Who was he? Why isn't his name in textbooks? Why didn't he get a Nobel Prize?
What if it's a she?
And it's not, because it was at a time when women weren't allowed to do science, right? Turn of the century, 19th century. So I go to the laboratories around the world to research the history and look at the notebooks of people. One of the persons who had first discovered, who studied physical changes in the brain with different effects, was interested in altitude illness, and this was Angelo Mosso in Turin, Italy. And he studied people who had cranial defects, damage to their skull, and watched the brain swell, measured brain swelling. So I went to his lab. That led to studies of electrical activity in the brain. That's the background. But when I was reading about that, another scientist published a paper from Zaragoza, Spain. He had analyzed climbers who came back down from Mount Rainier, gave them all brain scans, and of 13 climbers, all of them had permanent brain damage, except for one. Except for one. And you didn't need. Then he looked at climbers to lesser peaks. You don't need to go